Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Greg. I'm here, you're here, we're all here for the love of music, just like usual. Now today I'm going to be talking about an album that dropped on June 23rd of this year. Judging by the title of this video, the album is The Underside of Power by Algiers. Now this album is 12 tracks, it's just under 45 minutes, and I would describe this album as it's like a coalescence of several genres. Most notably, however, post-punk, there's neo-soul, it's a bit of gospel, but it's all experimental. It has an experimental sound to it. Now, The Underside of Power is a follow-up album to the group's debut, their self-titled debut, which came out in 2015. Their debut was critically acclaimed. It's a pretty damn good debut album. It actually made, a lot of critics and a lot of different album review sites. It made their favorite list for 2015, their album of the year list. So there were some high expectations going into this sophomore effort from Algiers. And I'm sure any fan of music is familiar with the term, the sophomore slump. That's when, a group puts out a really strong debut or a really promising debut. They seem like they have a lot of potential to continue making great music. And then, when their second album drops, it's just a flop. It's less than, it's less than average. It's something that, could have been more. But this album here, The Underside of Power, definitely avoids that sophomore slump. If you're looking for a perfect example of an album or a group that avoids the sophomore slump, look no further than The Underside of Power. Now, if you've never heard of Algiers, they're now a quartet, a four-man group, and each of the four members they're all multi-instrumentalists. They all contribute, different instruments, or they all play different instruments on this album. So to just say one plays guitar, one plays bass, one plays drums, that's not doing them any justice at all. If you're interested in knowing what instruments these guys play, just do a quick Google search. But I think the central point, the focal point of the album, is on Franklin James Fisher. He's a vocalist. It's on his vocals, it's on his lyrics, it's on his delivery style, because it's very, very powerful. Now, The Underside of Power is I like to call it a very smart album. To be blunt, it's not for someone who's simple-minded. It's not for somebody who's close-minded. This album really makes you think, and it hits on a lot of touchy topics, a lot of relevant topics in the world today. Like I said, this album is relevant. This album is vital. This album has almost a feeling of righteousness. And it is, in a sense, a very politically charged album if you look at the lyrics. As I just mentioned, Fisher's vocals they're almost angry sounding at times. They're powerful, they're fierce. This album has like a ferocity, but at the same time, there are parts on this album that have like a gospel feel, like I mentioned earlier. So it has a ferocity, it has a protest-like feel with the political lyrics. But then Fisher's vocals also have almost a calming effect. And this gospel vocal style is almost comforting, it's almost welcoming. And with these fierce, powerful lyrics, the band is telling you, stand up for yourself, stand up for what's right. But, and then the calming lyrics, the gospel style lyrics come in, and it's like saying, but everything's going to be okay. Like I said, this is a politically charged album. It talks about a lot of social issues. The opening track is called Walk Like a Panther. And it took me a while to figure out why this album or this track was titled in such a way, but then it all made sense when I actually looked up the lyrics. And the opening dialogue on the track is actually a dialogue from Fred Hampton, who is a former Black Panther, so that's where it gets its name. The last line in his dialogue is one of my favorite points on the track. It says, "But when I leave you, remember I said, with the last words on my lips, I am a revolutionary." And I feel like that, that line kind of kicks this album off really well. And Walk Like a Panther is Definitely one of the most upbeat tracks on the album. It's an amazing intro track. Now, I don't know about you, but I tend to judge an album based on its album opener. I'm sure there are some albums that have a weaker album opener, and the rest of the album is pretty good. But if I'm checking out a new album and the album opener sucks, I may just leave right there. So in my opinion, you need to have a strong opening, and the Underside of Power has just that with Walk Like a Panther. Now, the beat on this track is almost like a rap beat. It has some very fast drumming. Fisher's vocals he's almost yelling at times. It pumps you up. It's like, I want to get into this. What's going on here? Now, just a side note, the first 4 tracks on this album, in my opinion, are almost flawless. I haven't heard this good of an album opener, I guess, or first part of an album. This is one of the best of the year, in my opinion. On the second track here, Cry of the Martyrs, it has one of the most catchy choruses on the album. And the chorus has almost a biblical tone to it. I'm not sure if it was intended, but part of it goes, "They'll say our whole life is a locust, disturbing their fractious peace. But it is they who mangle our horizons of our defeat at Calvary." I don't do Franklin Fisher enough justice at all. He has an amazing voice. And this track has some pretty powerful lyrics. In verse 2, Franklin sings, "The sun is going down, but it won't ease the burning. I've seen it written on the other side of history. Listen to the martyrs cry for me." So what he's saying there is that, in our world today, just because another day is coming, the sun keeps rising, it doesn't ease the hardships. He's saying that he's seen both sides of history. He's seen the good and the bad. And on the last repeat of the chorus in this track, right after Franklin finishes his last word, there is a smooth transition right into the next track, which is the title track, The Underside of Power. I love this transition. It's so good. And The Underside of Power also has a great chorus. And it goes, "It's not a matter of fate, it's just a question of time, and we all fall down. Because I've seen the underside of power. It's a game that can't go on." Yeah, I get into these songs. And this is another pumped up track. Cry of the Martyrs is a little more dark, but The Underside of Power is almost, it gets your foot stomping, it gets you slapping your knee. It's something you can almost dance to, despite the subject matter. And essentially the theme on this track the theme on the album is, the group saying they've seen the underside of power. They've seen what happens when the wrong people come into power. And I know this album was released, or being written, I guess, in the wake of the 2016 election here in the United States, in the wake of Donald Trump being elected president. And I think part of the subject matter on this album is fueled by the feelings during those times, and still today. I really love the bridge on this track. It says, "Hold on, stand fast, stay strong, change is coming on. One day, a change is going to come." So it's almost offering, a little ray of hope. And then this song transitions into the 4th track, which is called Death March, which concludes the opening 4 tracks, which like I said, are pretty flawless in my opinion. And Death March touches on the topic of fascism and, just having this constant fear that, something bad is going to happen. The turmoil is building up. I think the opening line is, "This can't be how it all falls apart. Constant fear of explosion," which to me is like, there's now a constant fear of a nuclear war. Now, right in the middle of this album is another one of the main tracks. The track is called Cleveland, and I actually looked this up to see, what the reasoning behind the name was, and it actually has 2 meanings. There's a song by Reverend James Cleveland. It's called "Peace Be Still," and I guess it's based around a sample of this song. But I guess the primary reason it's titled Cleveland was to invoke Tamir Rice, which was a 12-year-old black boy who was shot and killed by the police in Cleveland in, I think, 2014. And Franklin Fisher, the vocalist, said that he wanted this song to sound like like the final judgment in the Bible. And, you know, it's definitely one of the most powerful tracks on the album. Now, throughout this album, Fisher and the band, they don't really seem to make any specific reference to any specific, you know, social or political issues. I mean, they're not specifically naming an issue that has happened. It's more generalized, except on the track Cleveland. It's pretty explicit what they're talking about here. And according to Fisher, he really couldn't avoid eschewing any references. He had to, you know, he had to be blunt. And right in the middle of this track, Franklin actually brings on he mentions actually several different names, and they're a little hard to hear. But, you know, some of the names are Kendra Chapman and Brother Andre Jones and Lennon Lacey, Sandra Bland, Roosevelt Purnell, Keith Warren, Alfred Wright. And I had to look these up because I didn't know what they were mentioned for. And they all had a common, you know, they all shared something in common. They all were hanged, I guess. They all died via hanging, and the initial ruling was that it was suicide. But once investigations took place, you know, there's a big question on whether these people were murdered or, you know, whether it was suicide or murder. And I guess, according to Fisher, he included these names as kind of a, like, don't forget about these people. He's letting the world know what happened. And after this, there's a couple lines. It says, the hand that brings the gavel down is the hand that ties the noose. But the hand is going to fold. The day is coming soon. When we fill it full of dust and resurrect the truth, because innocence is alive and it's coming back one day. And this, you know, these lines are almost a testament or a tribute to these names he mentions, to these people. Now, the most post-punk sounding track on here has definitely got to be Animals, which follows Cleveland. It's pretty in your face. It's pretty fast-paced. And there's a repetitive line in here. It's, don't feed the animals. Don't feed the animals. It says, you know, they'll take you in. They'll only come back again. And basically what it's saying is, don't give in to the wrong side of history. Don't go to the dark side. Because you'll only become, you know, someone like that. You'll only add fuel to the fire that is metaphorically burning the earth. Now on the track Plague Years, there's some instrumentation on this track that I really love. It's like a stick cracking sound, almost percussion, and then some piano. And there's also some beautiful piano work on the track Hymn for an Average Man. It's just this repetitive piano, and you know, it's almost a little bit hypnotic. It's really nice. And on the track Hymn for an Average Man, Fisher's voice on this track, he's almost like crooning, the crooning style of like Tom York from Radiohead almost. And he's basically talking about people handing their fates over to these corrupt politicians, the fascists and such. And earlier in the track, he says, somewhere down the line, I lost the plot. You think nothing has changed? And to me, this is saying that, you know, somewhere along the line, something changed. And so many people are denying it. So many people are choosing not to see it, that, you know, the way the world is right now, something has happened and something needs to change for it to improve. Or else we're going to keep going down this path, and the more and more people don't recognize it, the more I guess we're in deep shit. The penultimate track on this album is called Bury Me Standing, which is just a very drony instrumental, which actually leads into the final track. The final track is called The Cycle, The Spiral, Time to Go Down Slowly. It's a pretty long name. It's definitely one of the best tracks on here. And right away after it transitions from Bury Me Standing, there's this very jazzy, upbeat piano and percussion that just, it's repetitive. You know, something like that. And I feel it's a perfect way to end this album out. It ends on such a high point. And again, there's more powerful vocals on this track. Fisher sings, I can't stop going in and out of focus while you wait for the change. This is a total war on a promise. And again, this reinforces what I just said earlier about so many people don't think that there's something wrong, or they don't see it, or they're refusing to see it. And he's in the camp, he's on the side where it's like, he wants change. And he's not going to sit idly by while these other people either are waiting for it to happen or choosing, to do nothing about it. And then a little later, Fisher says, "We are the cycle that begins. We are the spiral to the end." Just saying again that change can't happen unless we collectively make it happen. And on the last line on this track, Fisher is almost offering, I guess, a benediction where he says, "You'll find hell where you fought love. You'll find hell when it falls apart." And then the track just slowly fades out. And I thought that was an amazing way to end this album. But I thought this was one of the most politically charged albums I've heard this year, and in a long time. It had a lot of good messages. But like I said, this isn't an album for somebody who's closed-minded. This isn't an album for, somebody who's afraid to think or chooses not to think. This gets you, this gets your mind going. This makes you question your own choices and your own morality and how you fit into the world, what side of history you're on. And, this is the kind of stuff I love. This is the kind of stuff that gets me engaged as a listener. And I don't know if this album justifies, these trying times that we're in right now, but it does a damn good job in my opinion. And like I said, it's not specific to what's going on now, but it was written within the last year. So I'm just going to say that what it's written about is pretty much everything going on in the present time. And I'm in the camp that Fisher's in. I want change. I want to see the world become a better place. I don't want to keep going down this path, to where we're going to end up in a nuclear war at, the worst of it. And this album it's cathartic in that respect, but it's also comforting, as I mentioned before. And like I said, this is definitely an album that we need right now. This subject matter needs to be heard. And I keep throwing this term around a lot this year. This album is relevant. It's one of the most relevant albums I've heard this year. And there's a few other albums that I'm going to talk about this year that are relevant in different ways, but, just as important. So props to you, Algiers, on this amazing album. Thank you for what you've done here. Way to go on avoiding that sophomore slump. Let me know what you think. Have you heard this album? Have you checked out their debut? Also, let me know if there's anything else you want me to review. Right now, I'm just kind of going back through the year and hitting some of my favorite albums. If there's any albums that are currently coming out that I really enjoy, I'm going to review those. But if there's something you want me to review that I haven't covered already, let me know down in the comments. I'd be happy to take any suggestions. But that's all for now, guys. I'm going to let you go. This was Algiers, the Underside of Power, and we're here for the love of music. I'll see you next time.